What's up everybody, welcome back to Toge Masters. Today I'm going to show you how to install some helper springs on a set of BCBR coilovers. So what you're going to need to install this is a rag, some cleaning solution, the actual helper springs, a 14mm wrench, the coilover wrenches that came with the coilovers, as well as a 17mm socket and an impact gun. Alright, so first we're just going to give this a quick wipe down. They have seen a few track days, so they're quite dirty. Once we do that, we can go on to the next step. Alright, once they are nice and wiped down, we're going to use the coilover wrenches that came with the coilovers to loosen up the locking collars. This will relieve the spring tension and make it easier to take these off and prevent them from flying off. We're also going to loosen up the lock collars on the lower portion of the coilovers. This is just due to the fact that the coils are going to sit a lot lower than they were before with the helper springs. As you can see, it's a little hard to get these off with all the dirt and grime on there. Alright, once we have all the locking collars loosened, we're going to use the 14mm wrench and we're going to loosen the adjustment knob and take this off. Should be relatively easy to do. Once that's cracked loose, you can twist that off. Alright, so with that adjustment knob removed, you're going to see a 17mm nut. Just use a 17mm socket and impact gun, and it should just come right off. Alright, with the spring removed, we can start working on installing the helper springs. What you're going to notice, it comes with 2 plastic washers, a metal collar, as well as the actual spring. On these plastic washers, you're going to notice there is a ledge on there. You just need to make sure that these are facing the correct directions towards the helper spring. This ledge helps the helper spring from falling off or moving from the coilovers. So just make sure they are seated correctly. There's one on top as well. And then the metal collar that you put the springs on. Alright, so once that's installed, you can put the springs back on there. What you're going to notice is I'm going to have to adjust the height of this to lower the whole spring and helper spring assembly lower. If you're going to install cups, which I will be doing later on, may or may not need to have shorter springs. In my case, when installing the air cups, I ended up having to purchase shorter springs just to compensate for the total height of the coilover spring with the helper spring. Another note is if your spring rate is really high, similar to mine, you're going to need those helper springs to allow the air cups to push the car up, as it depends solely on the strut and the movement of this spring. Alright, so once we get that on there, I am going to use the impact gun to tighten back that 17mm nut, and we should be good to go. And we're going to install the adjustment knob with that 14mm wrench. Alright, now that the coilovers are fully assembled, we are going to adjust the preload. Alright, so we're gonna tighten these collars until they are hand tight, and then we're gonna use the coilover wrenches to tighten the top collar until we have a gap the size of the actual wrench. And this should be enough preload for these coilovers. Alright, so the wrench fits in there, and we're just going to tighten these collars so that they are not loose and they won't back out, and we should be good to go with preload. You're still going to have to adjust the height on the lower portion of the coilover depending on your vehicle and how low you want to sit. Alright, and just to be sure, I'm double checking the tightness on these locking collars. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the air cup install on these BCBR coilovers.